the desperate signal the last stand of Thraxia Prime Ambassador Zara Kelleth pressed her six-fingered hands against the cold metal of the communication console. Through the crystalline windows of the orbital station, she watched her homeworld burn. The cities of Thraxia Prime, which had stood for over 15,000 years, were being consumed by something beyond their understanding. The Shadow Fleet had arrived 3 days ago. They came without warning, emerging from the dark spaces between stars like nightmares given form. Their ships were vast, organic-looking vessels that seemed to absorb light itself. When they moved, space around them rippled and twisted, as if reality was being torn apart. Zara's people, the Thraxians, had built their civilization on trade and diplomacy. Their technology was advanced, focused on communication, transportation, and peaceful exploration. They had created the most sophisticated interstellar commerce network in the galaxy. But they had never prepared for war. The Shadow Fleet did not communicate. They did not demand surrender or negotiate terms. They simply consumed everything in their path. Thraxian defense vessels, equipped with shields and sensors designed for navigation hazards, were obliterated within minutes of engagement. The enemy ships seemed to feed on energy itself, growing larger and stronger with each attack. The Galactic Council's failure commander Dex Volani, Zara's military advisor, approached with his usual measured stride. His blue-scaled face showed the exhaustion they all felt. The evacuation ships from the inner core worlds should have arrived by now, Ambassador. But long-range communications indicate the Shadow Fleet has spread throughout the Vega sector. Every major civilization is retreating to defend their homeworlds. Zara nodded slowly. She had expected this news, though it still felt like a physical blow. The Galactic Council, which had maintained peace for over 10 millennia, was falling apart. The Zentarian Empire, with their planet-cracking weapons, had lasted only 2 days. The crystal minds of Arcturus, beings of pure energy who controlled matter at the atomic level, had been absorbed into the Shadow Fleet's mass. Each species that fell made the enemy stronger. The Shadow Fleet seemed to learn from every encounter, adapting and evolving with impossible speed. Traditional weapons became useless. Energy shields fed their power. Even the most advanced artificial intelligences were somehow corrupted and turned against their creators. The communication officer, a young Thraxian named Kess, turned from her station with tears in her large, golden eyes. Ambassador, we have lost contact with the outer colonies. The defense grid around Thraxia Prime has fallen. Ground forces report the shadow entities are beginning planetary consumption. We have perhaps 18 hours before they reach the core cities. A call into the void. Zara walked to the great viewing screen that displayed the galaxy map. Thousands of star systems glowed like scattered jewels, but many were already dimming. As the Shadow Fleet spread across civilized space, she thought of all the species she had worked with over the centuries. The artistic melodians who sang their histories, the logical constructors who built wonders in space, the gentle gardener, species who cultivated life on barren worlds. All of it would be lost if the Shadow Fleet reached the galactic core. The ancient hyperspace relays there connected every civilized system. If those fell, the enemy could spread everywhere instantly. Commander Vorlani studied tactical displays with growing despair. We have contacted every major military power in the galaxy. The warrior clans of Rigel are making their last stand. The Techno-Union is evacuating their core systems. No one has ships to spare. Even if they did, conventional weapons have proven useless. Then we expand our search, Zara said. Quietly. Open emergency channels to every system in our database. Every species, no matter how small or primitive. Perhaps someone, somewhere, has an idea we have not considered. Volani looked skeptical. Ambassador, we are talking about species that have barely achieved interstellar flight. What could they possibly offer that our greatest civilizations could not? Sometimes, Zara replied, watching the Shadow Fleet advance on another world, the answer comes from the most unexpected places, the impossible. Response Kess worked at her console, sending the distress signal across the galaxy on every known frequency. The message was simple but desperate. This is Ambassador Zara Kelleth of the Thraxian Federation, speaking for all free species. We face an enemy that consumes everything it touches. Our greatest weapons have failed. Our strongest defenses have fallen. If anyone can help, please respond. Time is running out for all of us. For hours, they received only automated responses from dying worlds. Then something appeared on the long-range scanners that made Kess gasp in disbelief. Ambassador, we have a response from the Outer Rim. Signal is coming from a system called Sol. The third planet shows basic technology, but no faster-than-light capability. A primitive species that had not even left their home system. Zara almost dismissed it, but desperation made her curious. Play the message. A clear, determined voice filled the command center, speaking a language their computers had to translate. This is Earth Defense Command, responding to your distress call. We received your message about the Shadow Fleet. Help is on the way. Repeat, help is on the way. Hold your positions. Vorlani stared at the communication display. According to our database, this species calls themselves humans. Their technology level suggests they should still be using chemical rockets. They have no faster-than-light travel, no energy weapons, no quantum shielding. How can they possibly reach us? Zara was wondering the same thing when their response came. Understood your concerns about distance. We have been working on that problem. Estimated arrival time is 36 hours. Earth Defense Command out. The Araval 36 hours later, space itself began to tear open near Thraxia Prime. Zara watched in amazement as reality folded in ways their physics could not explain. The humans had somehow created a tunnel through space-time itself, arriving instantly across impossible distances. The ships that emerged were unlike anything in galactic databases. Where most civilizations built vessels of smooth curves and elegant design, human ships looked rough and practical. They were constructed from gray metal and white composites, with angular shapes that seemed designed purely for function rather than beauty. Captain Sarah Chun commanded the lead vessel, a ship called the Terra's Defiance. She was a compact woman, with short dark hair and intense brown eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. Next to her stood Admiral Marcus Rivera, an older man with silver hair and a bearing that spoke of long military experience. Ambassador Kelleth, Captain Chun, said during their first meeting aboard the Thraxian command station, "We apologize for the delay. It took our scientists some time to solve faster-than-light travel, but we always keep our promises." Zara could hardly believe what she was hearing. You developed faster-than-light technology in 36 hours? Admiral Rivera smiled grimly. When Earth is threatened, humans can accomplish remarkable things. But right now, we need to focus on your problem. Show us everything you know about this Shadow Fleet. Human analysis for the next several hours. Zara and her staff shared everything they knew about the enemy. The humans listened with intense concentration, but their questions were strange. Instead of asking about energy signatures or technological specifications, they wanted to know basic details. How did they move? Captain Chun asked. Did they show any kind of collective behavior? Dr. Elena Vasquez, the human fleet scientist, studied recordings of Shadow Fleet attacks. Are they truly intelligent? Or are they following some kind of programmed behavior? The question seemed almost primitive compared to the complex analyses other species had attempted. But the humans took careful notes and asked follow-up questions that showed they were thinking about the problem differently. Commander Jake Torres, the human tactical officer, reviewed battle data from multiple encounters. These entities adapt to whatever attacks them, but look at the pattern. When hit with energy weapons, they always develop the same type of absorption field. When struck with kinetic weapons, they create identical deflection barriers. They are not really adapting. They are following preset responses. Admiral Rivera nodded thoughtfully, like a computer program with sophisticated but limited parameters. The question is, what happens when we do something they are not programmed to handle? The human Plan DR. Vasquez presented her analysis to the combined human-Thraxian command staff. The Shadow Fleet appears to be a weapon system created by an unknown species. It was designed to fight opponents who would use their most advanced technology first and follow predictable military doctrine. She brought up holographic displays showing Shadow Fleet response patterns. Every major civilization that fought them used energy weapons, exotic matter manipulation, and complex tactical formations. The enemy system learned to counter these approaches because they follow logical military thinking. Asterisk. But humans did not evolve through pure logic, Captain Sean explained. We come from what we call a death world. Earth tried to kill us in thousands of different ways, so we learned to survive through creativity, adaptability, and sheer stubbornness. Human Plan was unlike anything any galactic military had ever conceived. Instead of using their most advanced weapons first, they would begin with the most basic technology and gradually escalate in unpredictable patterns. Instead of following standard tactics, they would deliberately act in ways that seemed inefficient or irrational. Commander Torres outlined the strategy. We will attack with chemical explosives while the enemy expects energy weapons. When they adapt to explosives, we will switch to kinetic projectiles. When they counter kinetic attacks, we will use biological agents. We will keep them guessing by constantly changing our approach. Admiral Rivera looked at the tactical display showing Shadow Fleet positions around Thraxia Prime. The key is to overload their adaptation protocols. If we can force them to respond to more variables than their system can process simultaneously, we might cause cascading failures. Zara felt a mixture of hope and terror. These humans were proposing to fight an enemy that had destroyed Galactic. Civilizations using tactics that seemed to ignore everything their species had learned about warfare. Either humanity was brilliantly innovative or completely insane. Looking at their determined faces, she began to suspect it might be both. Asterisk, the human solution chaos's strategy. The first human attack began at dawn over Thraxia Prime. Ambassador Zara watched from the orbital command center as Captain Chun's strike force moved into position above the largest Shadow Fleet concentration. She had expected sophisticated energy beams or exotic weapons like other species had used. Instead, she saw something that defied all military logic. The human ships began dropping simple metal containers that exploded on impact with bright flashes and thunderous noise. These were not advanced weapons. They were basic chemical explosives that any spacefaring civilization would have abandoned thousands of years ago. The Shadow Fleet entities seemed confused by these primitive attacks. Their sensors were designed to detect energy signatures and exotic matter manipulation. They had no protocols for chunks of metal filled with chemical compounds that exploded through simple molecular reactions. When the explosives hit, they caused devastating damage. The shadow entities, configured to absorb energy and deflect advanced projectiles, were torn apart by blast waves and flying debris. Explosions rocked the ground as hundreds of the dark creatures were destroyed. "This is incredible," whispered Kess from her sensor station. "Their adaptation systems cannot classify the threat properly." But Zara knew the celebration would be brief. "Watch carefully. The enemy will learn now." Sure enough, the surviving shadow entities began changing. Their dark forms grew thicker and more angular. New defensive configurations appeared that could withstand explosive forces. Within minutes, the chemical weapons were having minimal effect. Captain Shun's voice came over the communication system. Enemy has adapted to chemical explosives. Switching to kinetic bombardment, the weapon carousel what followed amazed every Thraxian observer. The human fleet began cycling through different weapon types in a carefully orchestrated sequence. Chemical. Explosives gave way to simple metal projectiles fired at incredible speeds. When the Shadow Fleet adapted to kinetic attacks, the humans switched to nuclear weapons. When nuclear resistance developed, they used laser cannons, but the humans did not stop there. They employed weapons from throughout their history, some dating back thousands of years. Flame projectors that used burning chemicals. Projectile weapons that fired solid metal bullets. Even simple explosives attached to small flying vehicles. Dr. Vasquez explained the strategy over the command channel. We are cycling through threat types faster than their adaptation protocols can process. Each weapon system forces them to reconfigure their defenses. While they are adapting to one threat, we hit them with something completely different. Commander Torres added his tactical analysis. The enemy system appears to need approximately 8 minutes to fully adapt to each new weapon type. We are changing tactics every 6 minutes to stay ahead of their programming. The result was beautiful chaos. Human ships attacked with equipment that ranged from cutting-edge technology to devices that looked primitive by galactic standards. The Shadow Fleet, designed to fight logical opponents who would escalate predictably, found themselves facing enemies who seemed to have no consistent strategy at all. Ground Operations Colonel Maria Santos led the ground assault against Shadow entities that had already landed on Thraxia Prime. Her troops deployed from simple metal dropships and attacked with weapons that seemed archaic compared to galactic military hardware. But archaic did not mean ineffective. Squad Alpha hit that cluster with incendiary charges. Colonel Santos ordered over her radio, Squad Beta, bring up the electromagnetic pulse generators. Squad Gamma, I want high explosive rockets on those tall formations. The human soldiers moved through the ruins of Thraxian cities with practiced efficiency. They attacked shadow entities with weapons the enemy system could not properly categorize. Chemical agents that corroded dark matter. Electromagnetic pulses that disrupted whatever energy fields held the entities together. Simple explosives that caused damage through pure kinetic force. Lieutenant David Park led a unit that was fighting shadow entities in close combat. Instead of energy weapons, his soldiers used devices that fired metal projectiles at high velocity. The enemy defenses, configured to absorb energy attacks, could not stop simple pieces of metal moving very fast. Park reported to Colonel Santos as his unit cleared another building. Enemy entities seemed to be experiencing processing delays. They keep trying to configure defenses for energy weapons, then get hit with bullets before they can adapt. This was the crucial insight that changed everything. The Shadow Fleet was not truly intelligent in the way biological species understood intelligence. It was an incredibly sophisticated weapon system, but still just a programmed response mechanism. The system overload DR. Vasquez made the breakthrough. Discovery while analyzing Shadow Fleet behavior patterns. Admiral Rivera, I believe I understand how their adaptation system works. They have preset responses for different threat categories, but they can only process a limited number of variables. Simultaneously, she brought up displays showing the enemy's response patterns. When we attack with multiple weapon types at the same time, their system tries to adapt everything at once. The processing load increases exponentially with each new threat type. Captain Chun immediately grasped the implications. So if we hit them with enough different attacks simultaneously, we could overload their entire system? Exactly. But it has to be the right combination of threats. Things their programming was never designed to encounter together. Admiral Rivera studied the tactical situation. The main Shadow Fleet mass was regrouping near Thraxia Prime's largest city. If they were going to test this theory, it had to be now. All ships implement Protocol Pandemonium, Rivera ordered. Every vessel in the fleet is to attack with different weapon systems simultaneously. Use everything we brought and mix it randomly. The goal is maximum confusion. The final battle protocol Pandemonium was a human, military doctrine that had never been tested on this scale. It involved every unit in the fleet acting with coordinated chaos, using different weapons and tactics. To create maximum unpredictability, human ships attacked the Shadow Fleet concentration with dozens of different weapon types at once. Nuclear missiles mixed with chemical explosives. Laser cannons fired alongside primitive projectile weapons. Electromagnetic pulse devices activated while flame projectors sprayed burning chemicals. Asterisk. The effect on the Shadow Fleet was immediate and catastrophic. Their adaptation protocols, trying to respond to dozens of different threat types simultaneously, began experiencing cascade failures. Enemy entities stopped moving in coordinated patterns and began acting erratically. Commander Torres monitored the enemy response from his tactical station. Their system is overloading. Individual entities are trying to configure different defenses at the same time. Some are becoming resistant to energy weapons, while others are protecting against kinetic attacks. They are no longer acting as a unified force. On the ground, Colonel Santos watched shadow entities beginning to collapse as their coordination systems failed. All units continue mixed attacks. The enemy is losing cohesion. Press the advantage. The battle became a rout. Shadow entities that had seemed unstoppable just hours before were being destroyed by weapons. They could not adapt quickly enough. Their sophisticated programming, designed to counter logical military strategies, could not handle opponents who deliberately acted without apparent logic. The revelation, as the last Shadow Fleet vessels fled Thraxian space, Dr. Vasquez made a disturbing discovery. Admiral, I have analyzed the enemy technology using debris from destroyed entities. I believe the Shadow Fleet was created by a species, very much like the current galactic civilizations. She displayed her findings for the command staff. The programming shows incredible sophistication and logical structure. It was designed by beings who thought in terms of efficient solutions and predictable strategies. They created the perfect weapon to fight opponents who would approach problems the same way. They did. Ambassador Zara studied the data with growing understanding. You are suggesting the Shadow Fleet was designed specifically to fight species like mine. Logical, cooperative civilizations that solve problems through careful analysis and shared knowledge. That is exactly what I am suggesting, Dr. Vasquez replied. Every major galactic civilization evolved through cooperation and logical thinking because those traits were necessary for developing interstellar travel and maintaining peaceful contact with other species. Captain Shun added her own analysis. But humans evolved differently. We come from a world where cooperation was important, but so was competition. We had to be logical enough to build technology, but creative enough to survive against stronger, faster predators. The Shadow Fleet had been the perfect weapon against the galaxy's civilized species, because it was designed by beings who thought like them, but humanity had developed along a different path. They were logical when logic worked, but they were willing to abandon logic entirely when creativity served them better. A new alliance. In the days that followed the Shadow Fleet's defeat, representatives from dozens of species arrived at Thraxia Prime. They came to understand how humans had accomplished the impossible and to forge new relationships with Earth. The Zentaurian Fleet Marshal Chronix, whose empire had fallen to the Shadow Fleet, spoke for many when he addressed Admiral Rivera. Your species has saved not just individual worlds, but the entire galactic community. How can we repay such a debt? Rivera's response surprised everyone. "You do not owe us anything, Marshal. When someone asks for help, decent beings provide it. That is what neighbors do for each other." But the galaxy had changed. Word of humanity's victory spread to every system. Species that had never heard of Earth began sending messages of gratitude and requests for alliance. The humans had demonstrated something that challenged fundamental assumptions about warfare and problem-solving. Ambassador Zara worked with Captain Chun to establish formal diplomatic relations between Earth and the Thraxian Federation. "Your species has shown us that there are different ways of thinking about problems. Perhaps if our civilizations had developed more diverse approaches to challenges, the Shadow Fleet would never have been so successful." Chun smiled. "Diversity makes everyone stronger. On Earth, we learned that lesson the hard way over thousands of years. Maybe we can help the galaxy learn it more peacefully." The promise, as the human fleet prepared to return to Earth, Admiral Rivera met with representatives from across the galaxy. The Shadow Fleet had been defeated, but its creators were still unknown. Other weapons might exist, designed to exploit the predictable nature of galactic civilization. We proposed the formation of a mutual defense alliance, Rivera announced to the assembled delegates. "Not just between our major civilizations, but including every species, no matter how small or seemingly primitive. Sometimes the best solutions come from unexpected sources." The proposal was revolutionary. For the first time in galactic history, advanced civilizations would formally cooperate with primitive species as equals. The alliance would share knowledge, resources, and different approaches to problem-solving. Ambassador Zara officially signed the Thraxian Federation into the alliance. "From this day forward, we commit to helping any species that calls for aid, regardless of their location or level of development. The galaxy is stronger when we stand together." As the human ships disappeared into their space-time tunnels, heading back to Earth, they left behind more than just grateful allies. They had proven that diversity of thought was a weapon more powerful than any technology. The galaxy would never again assume that there was only one way to solve a problem. And somewhere among the stars, other species facing impossible challenges would remember the day when humanity answered a call for help and changed everything.